College sports is in the middle of one of its most significant shifts in decades. How does it affect UConn? You're on the Hoops Cap.
Let's get it. Let's get it. Let's get it. Let's get it. Yeah. UConn, baby. Home of the champions. Let's go.
Welcome into the Hoops Cap Pod. Today on the Big East Energy Network and the Hoops Cap Pod here, we're joined by Yahoo Sports' Ross Dellenger, one of the most respected reporters in the game. And we dig into the latest in NIL reform, collective bargaining discussions, media rights stability, and what these changes mean for UConn and the Big East as a whole moving forward. You definitely don't want to miss this one. So, without further ado, we give you Ross Dellenger. All right, let's bring in Ross Dellenger. He's here right now. Really appreciate your time, Ross. So UConn fans have a lot of questions, and I get them frequently. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on the show. Some are basketball related, some are football related. So the first one, basketball school, no tournament expansion. Can you kind of go into that and the reasons why? I think people read your article, but I'm curious if you can give us a rundown.
Yeah, I should be clear about this. No tournament expansion this year, right? They're
Right.
still exploring future expansion. I think that possibility still exists. This year was always going to be hard because of just the logistics of doing this. A new city hosting the sort of another first four. And then just all the sort of the travel around that in the brackets and all that stuff. So I think it was going to be always going to be difficult to do it this year. They were working toward that. But I think eventually it just didn't get there. There's a lot with these negotiations in between the NCAA and the TV partner, CBS and WBD. There's a lot involved, not just money, but sort of advertising, the ability for the TV partners to have ads that maybe previously have been prohibited by the NCAA, like alcohol ads and stuff like that. So like all that is going on. Then there's of course the money, and there's the length of it, and then there's how you do the bracket and who plays in the first four games and how that impacts the amount. So it's just like there's just so much that I think they're still working through all that and not able to like get there for this year. But there just seemed to be, from a wide array of folks, a desire to get there at some point, and still expand to probably to 8, back out to 8, which would be what, 76? Yeah, it was 76 or 72, and I think 76 is the one that people have more so circled.
Okay, yeah, that was. I mean, you just answered what would have been the next question, which is what's the likely expansion? Are they listening at all to do they care at all that most fans? I mean, I think if you did a poll right now, I think I covered the Big East. There's 11 schools. I don't think 11 schools would agree on much. But if there was one poll that I think we'd get 100% on, it would be no tournament expansion. Do you think they care about that?
It would seem, yeah, if you're doing polls and based on a lot of like social media and sort of message board chatter, it's pretty clear that the fans don't want the NCAA tournament to be touched. Even those of the sort of the power conferences, the 4 and the 5 in basketball in the Big East, would even those who would benefit, right? Because those are the programs, or those are the conferences that would benefit to any expansion. They still seem to not want expansion. And maybe that's part of why they delayed it another year, to have more conversation and see where the fan base sort of is. I mean, maybe that was at least part of the conversation. But yeah, it's pretty clear, right? That that they don't, that fans in general don't want the tournament to be touched at all. There's sort of the old saying, right? Don't fix what's not broken. And I think even there are some power conference athletic directors who have said that to me. Should we really tinker with something that's pretty good? But this all goes back to um, money and
Mhm.
access for the power conferences that control a lot of the decision making going forward. And in a period where you are now compensating the athletes, and you need money to do that, um, and you need access to obviously to win championships. I think when you have those a small group of leagues um, having governance sort of power over the structure, they're going to influence. um, they're going to do things that benefit them, right?
Right.
And they're going to use the influence to benefit them, which is trying to get access to, trying to maybe even change the way the revenue is distributed. Um, and that's just kind of what it all sort of goes back to. We saw a similar thing, or we're seeing a similar thing with the college football playoff, and it's access and money. It's all about the access and the money, increasing both of those things for the leagues that have control.
Yeah, without a doubt. I read something new today, and I think your take on it about potential basketball revenue units. The advancing to the semifinals and finals could benefit both men and women's basketball for UConn, since they're quite frequently in those situations. How do you think that affects some of the competitive landscape for elite non-football schools? Because even though UConn is playing at the FCS level, I wouldn't consider them elite just yet, right? They had a good year last year. They're on the rise. But as far as schools that they're not in the SEC, they're not in the Big Ten. How do you think that's going to affect maybe the competitive landscape? If you can tell us about that.
Yeah, you're talking about like the rev share, right? The
Yeah,
the
the
revenue share
basketball revenue
stuff. Yeah.
units. Yeah,
hmm hmm Yeah. Well, it's funny because there's two things sort of going on here when it comes to like the um, revenue in basketball at a football school or at a non-football school. Right. And I think I had a story about this earlier this spring during March Madness, but like if you're at a school that doesn't have a big powerhouse sort of, or even just if you're not at a school that's in the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, or ACC, right, you're probably not investing as much money um, in football, and it gives you the
hmm
ability to invest that revenue share pie in basketball. And if you only, these schools only have a certain amount to give, 20.5 million for the first year. um, I think most programs at those four conferences will be given an average of, you know 14 to 16 million to football, because it is the thing that drives a lot of revenue there, and it drives ticket sales and sponsorships and all that stuff. Um, that you give, 70 to 80% of your revenue share cut to football, but that leaves, yeah, 2, 3, 4 million dollars for basketball. And there's some outliers in the power kind of
sure.
four group. You're going to have Kansas and Kentucky, even that's probably going to be more of along the, instead of 80-20% split, it's going to be more along the 60-40% split. Um, but if you're at a Big East school, and this is what my story was about in April, like, and you don't even have football, or you have just a low resource sort of football. Like maybe we're talking about a little bit with UConn, and I don't mean to say that UConn is not investing in football, because I think they are. I think their number
hmm
is going to be very competitive for sort of the group of five, or whatever. Um, but you have the ability to just offer a significant more for basketball than a lot of the four leagues do. And I think that's a concern for a lot of those in those four conferences, that a school that doesn't invest real as heavily as they are in football is going to be able to spend their more money in basketball, or a school that doesn't even have football will be able to spend, you know, their money in basketball. The opposite argument, I think Val Ackerman, the commissioner of the Big East, has said this to me in that story back in April, and again a few times, is I think that the schools that don't have the big football programs or football programs at all don't have the football money coming into the athletic department too, so you
Right.
don't have that to use, and she's made that pretty clear. um and that's where a lot of like donations are really important for Big East programs, to utilize donations and stuff to kind of donations are given to the athletic department, and then athletic department can disperse um, revenue share to athletes. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with all that, because we might not know the real effects of this until a year or maybe in a year and a half, because so many
Sure.
power conference schools front loaded all of this money, even in basketball, front loaded all this money in basketball this past spring to get ahead of the salary cap sort of world, and get money into players' hands. So players this coming season are basically already paid, and money will
Mm.
be pushed forward to other rosters. Basketball money will be pushed forward to future rosters. So we won't really know. So like we won't really know until a year or so away of how this will really impact. And it's really all very, very complicated. And there's a clearinghouse, right? And so some of these,
Sure.
the NIL Go clearinghouse, which you really can go above the cap. So these four leagues that we're talking about, the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, and ACC, they could go really above the cap in basketball if their basketball players can get deals through the clearinghouse. And we don't know about that. And that got challenged, last month a little bit, some of that already. And I'm sure there'll be future challenges in the clearinghouse protocol and process as well going forward.
Yeah, that's the you're referring to the NIL, the valid purpose rule, like the valid business purpose rule. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, like so you have I'll start and kind of get an overview of 'cause I think this is important to this conversation,
Sure, please.
is the College Sports Commission, obviously the new entity that the power conferences have uh, created and are administering to enforce the revenue share, everything that the House settlement sort of touches. And the biggest thing is the revenue share process. And the CSC sort of oversees three, I guess, buckets, right? The first is the cap management system, where everybody just kind of uploads their roster and how much they're paying each athlete. And the second thing is an enforcement investigative staff to enforce and investigate some of this stuff. Although that staff hadn't been hired, eventually they will. And then the third thing is the NIL Go clearinghouse, where athletes who strike deals outside of their school with third parties, that are for $600 or more, have to submit all these deals and have to be approved for their legitimacy, because one of the big things with the settlement in the clearinghouse is to prohibit booster pay. To get that,
Mm.
that's kind of a long fought um, issue for college administrators to try to um, sort of push away boosters. And so the clearinghouse has already run into some issues last month, because they have, in order to determine these deals, whether they're sort of real and they let them through, or they're sort of phony, um, and they stop them, they have two firewalls. And the first one is that valid business purpose, as you mentioned. And in the original guidance from the College Sports Commission basically prohibited any booster collective deals at all. It deemed booster collectives as not a real business. And
Mhm.
so thus any booster deal, or most booster deals, were going to stop at that first firewall and be rejected. And so they did reject a lot of deals based on that first guidance. But the plaintiff attorneys in the House case still have a big role in all this going forward, all the revenue share, all the enforcement, and they deemed that that was a misinterpretation of the settlement language. And so that first firewall has been loosened a little bit, and so
Mm.
certain collective deals are now able to go through. But there's still have to meet the second firewall, which is the range of compensation. So Deloitte has created this compensation range for random endorsement and commercial deals, that the deals have to fall within this range of compensation. And likely this will get challenged just like the first firewall, and we'll see how that works. So all that's kind of an explanation of the CSC. And the point is, if the power conferences are restricted to this 20.5 million, they're going to sort of find ways, especially with basketball, to get that number. Whether, if like pick a random SEC program, if they're spending $15 million on football and they're giving 2.5 million in scholarships, that reduces the overall rev share. Then that only leaves them about 3 million for basketball.
Right.
And so they want to get to compete with the UConns, right, or the St. John's or Villanovas, who are going to spend maybe 6, 8, 10 million on basketball. They got to get that 3 million up, and the way to do that is facilitate, create, whatever you want to say, deals outside of the school for their athletes. But those deals have to pass through this clearinghouse. And so it's funny because the power conferences created and administered this clearinghouse as a way to sort of prevent a lot of booster involvement in a circumvention of the cap. But they're going to need to do that to compete with the non-football playing basketball schools who can invest more. So it's a really interesting sort of situation. They want to prohibit all this stuff, but they sort of need some things to get through.
No, it's a great explanation, and I appreciate that. We spoke a long time ago about potential movement of UConn to the Big 12, and since then there's been kind of a cooling off of really a lot of realignment. The Pac-12 has their kind of, I won't make fun of it. I know people call it like the zombie Pac-12 and all that different stuff. But as far as like realignment and media rights, it's an interesting one because, if UConn is still considering a move to a P4 like the ACC or the Big 12, are they now more kind of waiting on media rights timelines to kind of dissipate or end? Because I think Big 12 ends 2030-31, ACC is extended to 2036. So have we kind of entered a relative stability period, at least for the next, say, 5 years in this conference realignment world?
Yeah, I mean, never say never, right? That is sort of the thought, is that we'll have, like, at least a couple years, probably maybe 2 years, until conversations need to be starting in 27,
Right.
28 about that span of that stretch of time where a lot of movement is expected, 2030 to 2032, right? You have a lot of contracts that sort of come open. The NCAA basketball tournament is one of them. It ends. The college football playoff contract ends. The Big 12 TV contract, as you mentioned, and the Big 10 TV contract all ends. So there's a thought that, if all that starts to happen like at 29 or 30, if that's when it actually happens and schools move, then usually go out 18 months to 2 years of when conversations need to happen for the movement to happen. So I would guess, in early 2027, early to mid 2027, that those conversations will start in earnest if they really haven't started before that. So you would think that we'll have a little bit of stability, but it does seem to be it's just like a nervous time, right? Everybody seems to be very nervous about what's coming, and affording all this athlete compensation, and so I just wouldn't put it past anything to happen even before 2030, because it's clear that whenever you think that it's calm, and something crazy sort of happens. But let's cross our fingers that we'll have at least a couple years before talks really get going seriously, and then maybe 4 years before actual movement actually happens,
Sure.
because there will almost certainly be movement. I mean, it's
Absolutely.
pretty clear. People ask me about the ACC all the time, and did the settlement with Clemson and Florida State to get them to drop their lawsuits. Did that kind of stabilize things? And I'm like, yeah. I mean, like for like a couple of years, but you had two schools sue their conference, settle with their conference only because the conference actually put an exit fee, in lowered potentially the exit fee. They're not just going to like stay in their conference, right? I mean, they
Right,
they
right.
settled for a lower exit fee, so it's pretty clear that we'll have movement. It's just like it's kind of a matter of just when exactly, and not if.
Yeah, it has to make sense, right? I listened to David Glenn, who's a prominent North Carolina ACC journalist. He said when he was covering Maryland's move to the Big Ten, North Carolina had an offer to go then as well, and he was very clear on that they said no, and that just had a lot to do with the timing of things. And now, if North Carolina got an offer to go someplace else, I'm sure they would potentially listen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in this begs the question, and because I heard this too, and this is more just kind of pie in the sky, but just kind of like a thought process. Do you think we'd ever get to a point where kind of everyone's kind of gearing up for a potential kind of just like having two super conferences for football, where essentially whether it's called the SEC or the Big Ten, I mean, those are the two big ones, or it's called two different things, but potentially where they don't always stay the same 24 teams in each conference, whatever it ends up being, these two large super conferences, where there's an ability for schools, whether in the group of five or a low level ACC or a low level SEC school that kind of gets left out initially, to potentially ascend to that, almost the way kind of European soccer does things, where there's kind of maybe not relegation, but essentially kind of an ascension to these maybe super conferences, so you can have an ability to play for a national championship. Because let's face it, like if you're Louisiana Tech, you're not going to play in the college football playoff, right?
Yeah.
Let's just be honest. But if you invest enough and you create that, and potentially get to that point, is that where you see college football potentially going in that direction? And then essentially where every other conference stays the same. So if you're in the Big East, you can stay in the Big East. But if you have aspirations to get to that super conference, you can do it, but only for football. Is that reality?
Yeah. That's certainly a notion that's you've heard that's been out there, right? That eventually the way to manage this is that football sort of breaks off, separates off major college football, and they organize themselves differently for just that sport. The argument against that has always been, I think, the SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey said this quite a bit, is that the argument against that has always been that you wouldn't just take one sport, right? That you would take all the sports, and I think that as we're like entering this sort of rev share era, and people are seeing it happen, kind of play out. I think there's a more and more of a sort of a desire from people to at least think about the splitting off of individual sports, and that making more sense, whether it's football or whether it's football and men's basketball. You've seen some collective bargaining type of models out there that um, just bargain with the players that participate in sports that earn revenue, which is football and usually men's basketball at many
Mm-hmm.
places. Um, so there's even a thought of like you do football, you break off those two sports. I don't know where, I don't know where it goes. There's certainly a lot of ideas out there. But one thing is for sure, like it'll go somewhere, because it it can't really stay here as it currently exists. Like it's going to be very difficult to continue with college athletics as it is now, because of the fear of lawsuits. Even with the settlement, it really just doesn't protect college athletics quite enough from legal challenges. So without you know some kind of collective bargaining, sort of agreement, or congressional legislation of some kind, some federal solution, then it's hard to see it staying here.
Yeah. Well, Ross, always appreciate your time and perspective. So thanks for breaking this all down for us. I think more so for you, obviously, you get a lot more questions, but I think I've gotten more questions around the future of not only just UConn, but college athletics as we go into this. So your perspective is greatly appreciated. So, we'll obviously come back to you if there's any changes and get your perspective as time goes on.
Yeah, it's good to be on. Thanks.
That was our conversation with Ross Dellenger of Yahoo Sports, and now an On3 Rivals contributor. I think Ross does a really good job of explaining really complicated issues that are happening in college athletics. So happy to bring that to you guys. Let me know in your comments your thoughts on, super conference, UConn's realignment or non-realignment. Can they stay in the Big East? Hopefully for our sake, right? From a basketball perspective, and do something different from a football perspective. Is that still something that is realistic? We'll find out more in a couple of years, because as we're kind of at peacetime. And then when things start to fire back up again in terms of realignment, kind of a couple of years of this rev share model. And I thought the most interesting part was the NIL purpose law. Like, you have to have a purpose. So if we hire Solo Ball as the representative of the Hoops Cap pod, he has to make appearances. So that's the exchange of goods there. You can't just have a booster that likes us and just gives him money and he doesn't come on the show. So I think that was explained pretty clearly by Ross. Should be an interesting time in college basketball as things progress, and we're here to cover it. This has been an episode of the Hoops Cap.
Let's get it. Let's get it. Let's get it. Let's get it. Yeah. UConn, baby. Home of the champions. Let's go.